Hello and welcome. So this tutorial series is really just meant to be a very simple introduction to creating a very basic website. So particularly this tutorial series is devoted to learning HTML and CSS. So HTML is hypertext markup language, and what that means is it's basically a way of creating some enclosed commands to tell your browser how to format text on a page, whether it should be bold, what font size it should have, where the paragraph or page break should be, if you need checkboxes or a table, things like that, right? And this HTML goes way back to the beginning of the web as we know it. Now, the other part that will be involved in this is CSS, and CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And what CSS does is it's a really nice, clean way to have consistent styles across your website. And what is a style? So a style would be, say, for paragraph headings, you want a particular font in a particular size, a particular weight, and maybe color, and maybe there's like a background color or something as well, right? So CSS allows you to define all of that, which would take a lot of time to do over and over and over again. And then you just reference that little bit of your style sheet. You just say, use this format here, and then maybe the body of your document has a different format. So you say, use the body format here, and so on and so forth. And so it just allows you to have a lot more control and do a lot less work in the end when you need to make modifications. And then if you decide that all of your headings need to be in Comic Sans and the body of your text of your document needs to be in Papyrus, then you can make those changes very quickly in one place, and it'll apply it to the entire document. And so HTML and CSS work really closely together. We are probably not going to cover JavaScript in this tutorial series. It's meant to just be a quick introduction on how to create, a series of web pages that you can navigate between, and how to bring images in, and there will be some other things we cover as well. But that's the primary part of this whole series. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get a code editor, right, or a text editor. And in the past, I've used Brackets. However, Brackets is being retired in September of this year. And Adobe and Microsoft have come together to create this Visual Studio Code, which is a free text editing software. It's available Mac, Windows, Linux. There are many, many, many other text editors out there. But this one, I know it works on everything. And it has some of the features that we would like, and it's not a huge program, and it's pretty quick. So let's go ahead and download that. So I have a Mac, so I'm going to click Download Mac Universal. It'll probably say Windows or whatever operating system you're on. And I will go ahead and download this. And it gives me some things about how it works and all of that. But I'm just going to go ahead and put this in my Downloads folder and save it. Okay, so once it's downloaded, we can go ahead and install it. So go ahead and do your installation. I'm assuming, wow, that is an ugly icon. I'm going to go ahead and put this in my applications folder. And I might also then go there and scroll down. Now, I also have Visual Studio, which is because I do a lot of work with Unity. Those two things are integrated pretty well. But for this series, I wanted something that was free and easy to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this on my dock as well while I'm at it. And there's Visual Studio Code. It just looks like, I think that there's something wrong with the icon there. That's hilarious. Anyway, so let's go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. And I'll act like I know what I'm doing, but I actually don't because I've never used it before. This is a first. Oh, my Jesus, sweet Jesus Christ. Okay, so when we get started, it looks like there's a quick setup page. I'm going to go ahead and pick a theme. Dark is default, you know, and I'm sure you can go through and find this again. I'm just going to say dark plus. I'm going to leave it at whatever that is, and just say next. Code in any language, blah, 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 any browser extensions. I just want to make sure that it says it has default settings for HTML and CSS support, but here we go. We need to scroll down this list to HTML, CSS support, and we want to click install. What this does is it's going to help us, it's basically going to, it's going to do code completion for us. So if there's words that are used frequently, right, that are common commands, like if we look down here, you'll see these things that won't make any sense right now. But it'll basically highlight and change the text color based on what type of content this is. And so we will go ahead and use this. And once we've done that, I think we should be pretty close to being done getting started. So I'm going to close that. See if I can hide all of this. Oh, here we go. It just opened up a new tab. That's what it did. Okay. So we've got that extension installed. And we can go next. Migrate your keyboard shortcuts. You know, I'm not going to do that because we've already got them. And then open your project, right? So I could pick a folder. So it would be great for you to, at this point, start a folder in terms of where you want to create things. So I'm going to go do this in the class for the folder I use for this course. So I'm going to hop over here real quick. And I'm just going to call this web or interwebs project or something like that. Okay, I'm going to click create. And if I hit open. Okay, so right, I have the folder open. You'll see that it's here in the Explorer, but I don't have any documents whatsoever created. And so there's just a few, you know, there's a few options here. There's some really great stuff that they have integrated in this already. But, you know, we're just going to go ahead and click on create a new file. You'll also notice that up here in the bar here, that the Explorer bar, there's this plus to create a new file. We can actually create new folders. We can refresh this if we've pulled in assets, like say we're going to be using images and maybe video and some other things on our site. We can pull those things in and then refresh it. And then there's this collapse folders, which we're not too worried about right now. But so I'm going to go ahead and click new file. And I'm going to call this index.html. So you'll notice as soon as I typed in HTML, this little icon showed that this is an HTML file. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, right? And so now I've got this blank document. Now, I've created this thing called a .html file. All it is a text file. It just only has text characters. Now, the reason you needed to install this code editing, this IDE or this code editor is because if we were to try and do this in Word or something like that, Word puts all this formatting stuff on, and the documents are not just simple plain text documents, whereas these are. So HTML works pretty simply, and the code completion works pretty well too. If I hold down and do the open caret, that's where I'm going to be housing any commands that I want to do. And essentially, the way this works is the computer is going to, or your browser, right, Chrome or Safari or whatever you're using, is going to go down and it's going to read from the top of the page and scroll down. And so it needs to know what type of document it is. It needs to know that it's HTML. But even if I just say, you know, HTML, it's going to, and I close that with a closing bracket, it's then going to go ahead and complete that, and it's got my cursor set right between these two spots because it knows that it needs this end thing so that when it gets to the end of the file, it knows it's at the end of the file. So I've got my HTML document, and the browser is going to see that. It's going to say, oh, this is HTML, and we're going to talk about setting a doc type and stuff here in a bit, but I just want to give you the basic format of how this works. And so then the other tag that needs to be in here is oftentimes we need a title. So if I hit that open caret and type T, I-T-L-E, and I think if I hit tab, it'll complete it, and then close this, it's going to do this. Now what this does is the title, when you look in a browser, like what's behind the window, and that's why I have it set the way I have it set currently. And I'm going to rescale this text because it's probably way too small for you to read. But what it does is the title is going to set the text that appears on top of your tab, right? So when I load this and when we preview this, right, it will actually show whatever I have in the title there. So we're going to call this Some Awesome Website, exclamation point. Right, so that's my basic, right, that's the title. Now, the next thing that every HTML document needs is what's called the body. And the body is where basically all of the content that you're going to see on screen gets housed within this body. And so I'm going to go ahead and type BODY, close that up, and now I've got the body. Now, within the body, I can have just text, I can have paragraphs, I can put images, I can put hyperlinks, which are basically when you click on a button, links to another page, right? All of those things can now go inside the body of this document. Okay, so I took a little break from the tutorial that I had started so that I could scale up the text some to make it a little easier to see while you're following along. So thus far, we've created the HTML tags here. That's what any of these objects that are in the carets are called. They're called tags. You'll note that if I hover over these, I get a little bit of reference as to what this thing is, which is kind of cool because you could actually grab an HTML document from a website or something like that, bring it in here, and see what the different parts do. Now, a lot of modern sites are going to have a whole bunch of other elements on there and little bits of other code, whether it's JavaScript or PHP or some other type of code that's going to be helping to generate those pages. And so you're going to see a lot of stuff that's going to be very strange looking. But if I hover over this title, it also gives me a pretty good definition of what the title does and why I would want to use it. And the same goes for body. It's a little bit, shorter reference. So we've successfully created an index page, but there's one thing we're going to go ahead and do. So I'm going to go ahead and go into this top body tag. I'm going to hit the space bar, and I'm going to go ahead and type the letter B. Now, when I do that, several different options come up. The one in particular that I'm interested in is BG color. So if I hit tab, it's going to auto-complete that for me, which is really awesome. And BG color stands for background color. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to do this as a test. Now, whatever background color I want to use, I'm going to be putting in inside these two sets of double quotes. And you'll see my cursor's already there. So I'm just going to type in red as the color that I want. Now, there's actually something called web color, or hex color, where there's a hashtag and then a 6-digit value that's going to define color. And we'll talk about that and how to figure out what those are in the future. But for now, we're just going to use this red because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create something so we can essentially test this and make sure that it's working and make sure that it actually loads into the browser that you want it to. And so then in the body of this thing, I have a space here between the top body tag and the bottom. I'm just going to type in, wow, I made something cool, right? So I'm just going to have some text in there. Doesn't matter what it is. So now that I've done all of that, I'm going to go ahead and save it. And so once I've saved it, right, you just say File, Save, right, Command or Control S. And once I've saved it, what I want to do is I want to build and run this. or debug this. And so if I come down, there's these different options. There's the search option. I honestly, source control, we don't need to worry about source control right now. But then there's run and debug. If I click run and debug, it it says open a file which can be debug or run, blah, blah, blah. If I click run and debug here, it's going to ask me to select my environment that I want to run this in. And what I want to run this in is Chrome, right? Chrome is the browser that I'm going to want to run it in. I might be able to choose Safari on this list as well, and eventually I would probably want to test it in Safari because Safari sometimes has things that look different. But for now, I'm just going to click on Chrome. And once I do that, it will open Chrome and it will load this file into the browser, right? So you can see this is the file path all the way down to interwebs project and index.html. And now I have this page with a red background and this black text that says, wow, I made something cool, which it's not very cool, but it's kind of cool that it's there and that we made it. So now that I've made this cool thing, if I squish my this window down a touch, you'll see that I have the file loaded as we did. But if I want to make changes and test this again, I don't have to go to run and debug anymore. All I need to do is come in here and make a change. So I can just say woohoo, or whatever I wanted to do in there, and then save the document, come over to my browser and just click refresh. And when I refresh it, you'll see that the change has been applied to the document that's being displayed in the browser. So now that I've got these two things set up, I'm ready to make a lot of changes. And so let's talk about some of the basic tags that HTML uses in order to format our text. So right now, we've got the HTML tags, which basically define the entire document. We've got the title, which defines what's listed up here. Then we've got our body, which is all the content that's going to be displayed on the page. And you'll notice, this is just plain text that's being displayed here. And so we need some ways to format this and change it. So one type of tag that gets used quite frequently, they're called header tags. And there are several different ways to, there's several different forms of header tags. But if I just go ahead and type an opening caret and then type H, and you'll see there's H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, right? These are all of the different options. And so I'm going to say H1, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to call this first title, or first heading is probably what would be best, right? And then we'll have this text that says, I made something cool. And let's just go ahead and save this and see what we get. Okay, so you'll see that without any additional formatting direction, the H1 header just makes the text, whatever my default text is, it makes it, significantly larger. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here. And I want you to note that if I've hit enter and I refresh this over here, oops, I save this and I refresh this over here, nothing happens, right? This all reads to the computer as though it is one continuous line of text. All of this white space that we're putting in here in terms of these tabs that get formed, and that's all organization for us. The computer doesn't care, right? And so, so that's something to be aware of. Oftentimes, if you have a header and then you have text under it, it's good to tab that in just to make your life easier so you can see what you're doing. And then you can hit return to go to the next line and hit delete to delete the tab that was auto-generated. Now let's go ahead and just say H2. We can call it something else. We could say second heading. And we can go ahead and save this and then go ahead and refresh this. And so you can see that the first heading has the largest font size. Second heading is smallest. If I go down to, I think I can't remember which one was the lowest here, H6. So if I go to H6 and then just type smallest heading, and then save this and come over here and hit refresh, you'll see that it's actually even smaller, right, than the default font size for the page. So, right, all of these headings, H1 through H6, allow us to have these different headings. Now, one of the nice things about CSS, once we start talking about that, is that we can essentially create styles for each one of these headings. And so we can totally change this. We could make it so that H1 is actually far smaller than H6, and H6 is absolutely enormous. And we can define fonts, and we can define all sorts of other great things that we can do with this. Okay, so we have header tags. Now, one of the other things that can become a problem is how text wraps and everything. So if I go ahead and just create a bunch of text here, oops, and don't accidentally create a field set in the middle of it. But if I just create a bunch of text and I go ahead and save this, and then I come over here and refresh it, you'll note that the text does not wrap, right? It just keeps going. If I go ahead and select all of this text, and I copy it, and I paste it, and paste it, and paste it, and paste it, and save it, and then render this again, you'll see that, right, it flows all the way over, and then if I expand or contract the size of my window, it's going to wrap with the edge of the page. Now, we will eventually use CSS to kind of control where and when and how that happens. But for now, that's just something to note that's part of a problem. Now, one of the things that is a very common tag to use in HTML is the P tag, or the paragraph tag. So if I come in here and I type in just an opening caret P, closing caret, you'll see it changes that. I'm going to go ahead and cut the second half of this, and I'm going to just drop this somewhere in the middle of this wall of text. And then I'm going to hit enter so that I can see where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and create a paragraph tag again and cut that second one and then paste it down here at the bottom of this second paragraph. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and let's go ahead and render this or refresh this. So now you'll see that, right, the first, right, where I basically have created an empty space between these two paragraphs, right? So that now I've split my text up into two groups. And paragraphs are another tag where we frequently use other stuff. And something about this browser there we go. Right. So we frequently are going to be styling, and it's something that we use all the time. So once upon a time, when you wanted to say bold text or other things in line, like so, you'd tags this. There's this B tag, and I can just say bold in there, and I can save this. I can render this. And you'll see that, right, what it's done is it's created this bold text that says bold here in the middle. So anything that's in between these two tags gets included as part of that thing. Now, another tag that gets used frequently, and these are, again, right, we currently, by default, this bolds the text. However, again, with CSS, we could make it so that these tags, we can kind of basically use them to style that text in any way that we want to. So another way that we can create a break in a body of text, if I go ahead and say right here in the middle, I want there to actually be a break after the semicolon. If I do an opening bracket and hit BR and a closing bracket, this is one of the few tags that does not require a closing tag, right? The opening tag is just the first is the tag name, B, P, H6, whatever. The closing tag is that backslash and then the same thing. And note that the BR, which is a line break, does not require that. And so if I go ahead and save this, and if I go ahead and reload this, you'll see that this is where that line break is now occurring. and then it kicks the rest of the text over here. So if there's a point where, I know that I want to have breaks more frequently, and I don't want the text to wrap all the way around, then what I can do is I can go ahead, oops, and um, create those breaks wherever I want a break to be. So maybe I need one more break here after this one, right? And so you can play around with this as in terms of a way of formatting, right? So I can make sure that my text is within this particular space. So we have bold tags. There are also, I think is it S that strike through? I can't remember. We're going to find out real quick. Yes. So the S tag allows you to strike through text. I is for italics. So if I make that change and render and refresh this, you'll see that bold is now in italics. If I want to double up, I can create a bold, oops, not a line break, but a bold tag, and I can actually nest the italics within the bold tag. So if I create that bold tag and I save this and I come over here and refresh this, you'll see that it now is in bold and it's in italics, right? So there are really simple ways to start making changes to this document and formatting it. Now, one of the other organizational features in HTML is the div tag. And the div is like a division in the body of a document. And if we put div tags in here, I'm just going to go ahead and type div, and I'm going to put like a little bit of text in there, and then I'm going to go ahead and save it. I'm going to render this. You'll see that it basically, with its default settings, it pretty much does the same thing as a paragraph, right? It creates this, what it does is it creates a division where there's some spacing above it, there's spacing below it, and potentially there's margins on either side. Now, all of that formatting stuff that we can do, we're going to be doing with CSS. And so this is really just to show you that this is a tag that gets used very frequently. Now, one of the things you might be asking is like, well, how do I learn all the different tags and what they do? Are you going to go through every single one, and how am I going to possibly remember all of those? I'm not going to go through every HTML tag, and we will go through the ones that are important. This is just that basic introduction to make sure things are working right and you're getting the general idea of how this works. And then the next tutorial is going to be a much more specific application of these things. And then once we apply this in some set, then we're going to migrate into using CSS. So, so the question would be, where do I go to find a reference for what I can do just with HTML? And to find that, there's a website, W3 Schools. And if I search for W3 Schools, it's a really nice free resource. And actually, if I just click on the link, HTML is the thing that comes up. And so you'll see that, right, I did not include the doc type at the top of our thing, but this is a really great resource for HTML, for CSS, looking for the reference as well. So there's this learn option where it's pretty great. You can, if you click try it yourself, what it does is it actually brings up this little window that has all the text, and then it shows you a preview as well. So you can come in here and you can, delete text and run it, and make changes and test it as well. And that's part of their tutorial process. So that's an additional resource. But along with the learning part of it, there's also the reference. So if I click on HTML reference, it goes through what every single tag is. And so we will go through, a bunch of these as we need them. But you can see that there are a ton of different, tags in here, and each one's going to have a very specific use. And there's some of them that we use very, very frequently, and there's others that are very specific and have very, very specific uses. And so, if the other thing about this is it gives you a little bit of text here, but you can also click on any of these. And I was going to specifically go to the A tag, which is where did it go? Maybe I have to search for it. I don't know why I'm so blind to it. Let me just see. A, there we go. I don't know why I couldn't see it, but right. So A is defines a hyperlink. And then if I click over here, what it does is it's going to take me to this definition and usage page, and it kind of shows you what browser supports it. Clearly, every browser that's a major browser supports this. If it didn't, that would be problematic in terms of a browser. But uh, they do go through and they give you examples, and you can still do the try it yourself. So it says, right, A, and then href is basically the page that you want to link to, and then you could, whether you're using an image or whether it's text, or whether it's actually this, you want to be able to send an email, and you create that email address that they want, or right telephone number, et cetera, et cetera. So there are, this is a really great, clean, simple resource that I use frequently. And it also includes CSS, it includes JavaScript. And so if you get a certain, distance in this class and you're interested in going further, then this is one resource that will really help with that. Okay, so we've covered the base resource that you can use for outside stuff. We've created a super awesome website, and we've gone over a little bit of the interface and how to create documents and save them in VS Code. I think that's a pretty good start for this first tutorial. So we will come back with a more specific example where we'll build out a website with images and some other things. And then we'll take what we've built, and we will expand on that with CSS and start using CSS to do some of the formatting that we need to do to make a much cleaner looking site and have images and text aligned the way that we want them to be.